such a backlash that you'll be back in the 30s with the sort of thing that happened with high unemployment.
Milton, there's a direct challenge. What would you do about displaced workers, or let the slack be taken up by others?
I believe that you have to separate and should separate sharply the issue of what you do about people in distress from how you handle the industrial system. I do not believe you ought to have a special program for displaced workers. What you ought to have, and what all societies do have, is some mechanism, voluntary or governmental, which will assist people in distress. We have another program in this series which deals with exactly that issue, and in which I come out, as you know, in favor of a negative income tax as a way to do it. But I think it's a great mistake to try to link it directly with tariffs. And the reason is that many people who are displaced are not in trouble. Many of those have good alternatives. Some of them will benefit from it. There are some who will be in distress, of course, but there are always people who are in distress for all sorts of reasons. In a dynamic society, demands are going up here, demands are going up there. There is no more reason, in my opinion, to have a special program for those who are displaced because of the changes in demand and supply on the international scene than because of the changes on the domestic scene.
Quick reaction to that.
Why would you want to return to a concept that this country had in 1900? Why would you want to return to where a few control the economic destiny of every working man and woman?
It's exactly the other way, Mr. Deason. The best way to limit the control of a few is free trade on a worldwide basis. There is no measure whatsoever that would do more to prevent private monopoly development than complete free trade. It would be far more effective than all the antitrust suits in the world.
I totally disagree. You would wind up with a situation like in the movie Rollerball, where corporations carved out their spheres of economic influence throughout the world and controlled everything. It would be controlled by corporations in its entirety.
Excuse me, you saw the picture of Hong Kong, didn't you?
Yes.
Where are those corporations there?
We might get down that alley and have a difficulty finding our way out of it. Could we move to another big theme in the film? That is that the third world countries have, broadly speaking, made a very serious error in moving into planned economies from beginning to end. And you use a phrase in the case of India, central planning has condemned the Indian masses to poverty and misery. Now, what's your reaction, Professor?
I partly agree with Milton as always and largely disagree with him. I think it is true that the invisible hand ought to be seen more in the poor countries than it is. And I would like to see the iron fist disappear. Unfortunately, it's the other way around. On the other hand, I think it cannot be maintained that laissez-faire is the answer, either that it's a necessary or a sufficient condition for development. Let me go to Milton's examples and refer to Japan. Japan is a prime example, actually, where the visible hand is invisible to everybody who's outside of Japan, but it's writ large on the wall for the Japanese. The Japanese government, right from the Meiji Restoration, has taken a very active interest in the development of the country. It has regulated technology imports. Even to this date, the government and business have a sort of strong symbiotic relationship. I think it's just the last.
Highly paternalistic.
And business is highly paternalistic. I don't think it's a valid example at all of what I believe was the implication of Milton's program.
Let's begin, Helen Hughes. On this theme, has the third world made a disastrous mistake in almost unanimously moving into planned economies rather than the free market?
Well, first of all, it hasn't almost unanimously moved into planned economies.
Overwhelmingly so.
Not even overwhelmingly. I mean, India is a large country, but the majority of developing countries are not centrally planned. They have some sort of planning. Secondly, some of the countries which have been most successful have had the highest government intervention. The best examples are Taiwan, Korea, Brazil, Singapore. And even in Hong Kong, which is often held up as an example of no government intervention, I mean, this is just not true. The Hong Kong government has provided the infrastructure, it has provided the roads and the ports and the schools, and it's been very important. But when you move to a country like Malawi or Papua New Guinea, you can't do without government intervention. There is nothing there. There are no entrepreneurs in place, and the American entrepreneurs are not interested in small places like that.
I'm not in favor of no government intervention. I never have been. I point out in the film that what the government did in Hong Kong was very important. The question is what kind of intervention. And in the states you've described, in the places you've described where you've had success, governmental intervention has been of a rather special kind. It has provided infrastructure. It has not tried to determine the outline of industrial production, the areas in which industry should go, exactly what the allocation of. It has not gone in for central planning.
Well, that's just not true in Korea. I mean, you're factually wrong, because in Korea, the government has
it is true in Taiwan.
It's fairly true in Taiwan, but not in Korea, which has grown faster than any other country, where Korean exports have been determined to a very large extent by direct government intervention. I think your point is, what sort of government intervention, what for, and what are the trade-offs between government intervention and the free market? These are the relevant issues.
What is the role of government in relation to the market economy? How do you see it performing, Don Rumsfeld? Do you want to see governments, as it were, enforcing competition by chasing down monopoly, restrictive practices, and all the rest in the society?
The record's clear that they don't do it well. They can't manage the...
But does that mean they shouldn't
take
do
the
it
wage
at all,
price
or do it better?
controls in the United States of America. I happen to have been involved, and I don't say it with any great pride. The real world is, I don't care about good intentions, I don't care about brains, I don't care about integrity. The fact of the matter is, they're not smart enough to manage the wages and prices of every American, 215 million strong. They can't do it well. They do it poorly. And the weight of that is harmful. It's graphically shown in every document issued by the Council of Economic Advisors in the United States.
But what about the additional question, though? Does the government properly, in this country or elsewhere, ensure competition by other devices? I'm not talking now about price control, wage control, but ensuring competition rather than permitting price fixing or agreements and monopoly. What do you feel about it?
I feel the government properly acts in that area. The government must be there to ensure competition.
The government's not smart enough. Look at the antitrust law. You talk about the implementation of antitrust regulations in the United States between the Department of Justice and the FTC. It's a patchwork mess. There isn't any logic to it. People don't know what to do. They can't get answers. They're inhibited from mergers and consolidations that would make a lot of sense from the standpoint of the consumer.
And would make even more sense from the point of multinational corporations.
I think that one of the points you're making is that it's very hard for the government to intervene in a very large country like India or the United States. But compare government intervention in some of the small homogeneous countries of Europe or a Singapore. And I think that's very important. Switzerland has a great deal of government intervention. Sweden, Denmark, Norway. I've just quoted you the 4 highest income countries in the world. They do have intervention to try and protect the functioning of the market system and to make it more efficient.
Milton is absolutely right that if you're talking about central planning, that has been disastrous, absolutely, in terms of having targeted industrial allocations and so on. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind who has studied the problem over the last 20 years.
In India, too.
In India as well, very definitely.
You advised on that, didn't you?
No, not on centralized planning, no.
That wasn't a fair question anyway.
That's all right. I was over there as an advisor, too.
I've been on the side of the angels on that for a number of years, to a point where I'm supposed to be a friend of Milton's there, which is disastrous.
To give advice is one thing, to have it taken is a different one. I agree very much with what Helen Hughes has said, that the more homogeneous a country, the less harm a government will do by intervening. I don't believe it does positive good. I just simply believe it does less harm. But as to antitrust, I am in favor of the laws which make agreements in restraint of trade illegal. Most of the rest of the antitrust apparatus has promoted monopoly instead of hindered monopoly. If you look at where there are monopolistic elements in the world and in the United States, including the multinationals you want to refer to, in almost every case, that monopoly derives from a special grant by government. And therefore, the problem is not how does government enforce competition? How do you keep government from setting up monopoly?